Hey guys, Mouth here once again, and the builds just keep on coming. This time around, I gave myself kind of the task to use Winter Orb in kind of a creative way, and also use the new ring that scales off of Fire Res and gives you extra penetration based off of extra Fire Res over the top of your normal maximum. That thing is hard to use, let me tell you what. It reduces your fire res by, at best, 65%, because it has a roll of 65 to 75, so you pretty much need to have one at 65, and then you need to start going all out to get a lot of fire res everywhere so that you are actually utilizing it to give yourself some penetration on top of the fire res. Now, as you can see, it's Winter Orb, and you would think, hey, that's not normally fire. And no, not really, but you can turn Winter Orb or a cold skill like this into complete fire by using Cold to Fire, by using the Pyre Ring, and by using Avatar of Fire. In this case, I went with a Crest of Desire for this build, so it is a one-socket helmet. Thus, my Winter Orb has no actual links, and I'm not using the Cold to Fire gem. So without that, I had to go with a Pyre and then Avatar of Fire. So almost all of my cold damage is converted to fire. We are losing just a little bit of it. And then I'm using Chieftain to scale a bit of a fire damage, like fire explosions, because the 5% fire explosions feel really good. And then, of course, just all that extra fire pen from the ring on top of that. The other cool new item that I wanted to utilize specifically for Winter Orb is the wand that gives you additional projectiles, but then they dissipate once they collide with anything. Thus, that type of wand and modifier means that you have to use certain skills so that you're not really losing out on interactions. And for that, Winter Orb's pretty good. You can do something like Creeping Frost, you can do Blazing Salvo, things that more or less hit the ground and don't really need to like pierce, chain, fork, that sort of thing. So I wanted to use those with Winter Orb, and I initially did dual wield them because you get 3 additional proj. So with 2 of them, you get 6 additional proj, and then Winter Orb with its 1 base gets a lot of extra power because those projectiles can overlap. I leveled with 2 of them, and having 2 didn't really seem worth it because the 3 additional proj that you would gain would quite often just splooge out behind the enemy and not really overlap quite as well. So it wasn't particularly worth doing. So in this case, I ended up just being a one-hand wand setup with a shield as well. And yeah, it's just a pretty weird setup because we got a lot of fire res everywhere. I started out with a combs as well because I didn't need an extra link setup. So I just went with a combs and had almost 6k life without too much investment. But it ended up making more sense to be Cloak of Flames and then just have better EHP basically instead of having a bit more HP. The end result here is that the Winter Orb Chieftain can farm maps pretty well, but I'm not super happy with the build. Like, I don't know, something about it just ain't really there. My defenses are 90 max res, a lot of regen. We've got Cloak of Flames, we've got endurance charges, and also a Merc with Combs binding, so even more fizz taken as fire. And all that together, I still don't feel that thick, honestly, because max res just isn't really where it's at unless you have a big sort of secondary or tertiary even defense layer like block, like 20,000 ES, things like that. So it was thick enough for like conventional mapping, but once it came down to things that hit a bit harder or larger content, then I didn't really feel particularly tanky while standing still and also while doing an attack or a spell that didn't really deal that much damage. I don't know how much damage I had in the end. I did a totem setup as well for a 6-link, so then I had 6-link Winter Orb totems while also just channeling my own. And yeah, in the end, maybe like 5 million DPS or something, which really isn't too impressive unless you're like pretty damn immortal. And I wasn't immortal, I was thick, but yeah, definitely not immortal. And you can see that I've also got more stacks of Winter Orb, so the idea was to kind of try and get extra quality stack with the Crest of Desire and and Ashes of the Stars as well, because as you get more quality, your Winter Orb gets more stacks, and that means that it fires off faster, and then you can be more of a standalone Winter Orb build. In recent times, I've kind of more tried to do Winter Orb combined with a Castwell channel because that helps solve single target. In this case, it was just pure Winter Orb, and like I said, it was decent enough, and it's definitely possible to make a pretty good Winter Orb just by itself. If you do more of like a cultist maybe, and some proper, charge stacking and cold damage and all that, it'll deal pretty good damage. Especially with a Crest of Desire if you want to go that route, or just some quality stacking in general with a Dialas, something like that. They can be pretty good. As you can see, I started farming like Harbingers and some tier 17s, and conventional mapping, as I said, was not too bad. Like, we could be pretty thick against that. We had good recovery, good thickness overall. The mapping was decent amount of fun when I started juicing with like Breaches or Harbingers, stuff like that. But just normally, I don't know, wasn't super satisfying. It really does need to be pretty juiced content for the explosions to kind of take over and feel pretty satisfying about just using the 5% Chieftain thing. So overall, it was an okay build. It was an okay thought process. It was an attempt at using the ring for the first time. I think that thing does have kind of potential, but you probably need a much more scaling skill that just lets you actually utilize all that fire pen into a much more potent amount of damage, I suppose, because Winter Orb, not really it, but I did almost come to 200 fire pen because of that ring, and it does have some source behind it. Still infinitely worse than just grabbing a Doriani, slapping it on Merc and calling it a day, but all that said, still kind of viable. So let me go ahead and show you how I built this character to this stage. So here's the character, level 93 and a half, moving on to 94, more fire res than DPS. So I was kind of anticipating that I'd have a shitload of fire res and not the best damage with it because it's kind of Winter Orb. So as you can see, without the ring, we are currently at 745 fire res, and with that ring, damage penetrates fire res equal to overcap fire res up to a maximum of 200. So we've hit 90, we then overcap, and even with our flask up, we're not quite at the cap of 200 extra. And like I said, 66 reduced fire res on this one. It goes down to 65. Those are very expensive, so I grabbed this one for 2 divines. Anything higher than that, and yeah, you're giving yourself more of an uphill battle, and then not really utilizing it quite as well. So that's basically the build around Enmity's Embrace and also Mystic Refractor. 3 additional proj. Proj cannot continue after colliding, so instead of having to do any additional proj scaling like LMP, GMP, none of that, we just have a 1-socket Winter Orb in a Crest of Desire. So you can see the quality is extra stages, so we have 10 bonus stages, and then you get more increased proj frequency per stage, and also increased duration. So if you actually like channel it all the way up, it goes up to 18 stacks, and you can see it lasts a little bit of a while. So you can then like start, zooming around a bit more. If you actually scale duration a good bit more than this and cast speed a good bit more, you can do much less actual channeling and much more just zooming around. You can also see that with more stages, it does get bigger, so we've got a pretty big ball on our head indeed. So that's kind of the basis of the build. Winter Orb, extra stages, Crest of Desire gives us +7. It's also got +2, so theoretically this one's a +9 with extra quality and also double damage. It also means it doesn't cost us too much to actually channel, because if you put it into a real 6-link, you're going to have to solve mana somehow. But I decided to also put it into a real 6-link for Winter Orb's totems, which has early focus, control destruction, cold to fire, multi-totem, and spell totem. And yes, one interesting part about this build is it's a non-crit build. I very rarely end up making one of those, but after putting the entire thing together, it just seemed really hard to also justify getting good crit and then crit multi in the build. So I kind of had to just do non-crit. But it is possible, I'd say, to still be crit with this type of a setup. It's just a good bit harder. So we've also got an Ashes of the Stars that gives us 29 quality. So in the end, this one does have just enough quality to get 18 stages. Otherwise, it's also one of the first times, maybe the first time I've used Annihilation's approach in a build. So these boots make you basically take like Righteous Fire amounts of damage, but give you adrenaline in return. And as you can see, we sustain that easily. We also sustain Righteous Fire pretty easily, so I'm using both for damage and like various gains and stuff. And as you can see, we still have quite a lot of regen on top of that, and with flasks and stuff, it goes even further beyond, and it does feel pretty good for a recovery. So that's kind of how we built the character. We did a lot of max res stacking so that Chieftain can give a decent amount of extra res to everything else. We've got 5% explode, and then I also used this in the end just to sustain enduring cry and endurance charges, but I only picked this up like a level or two ago. Otherwise, I just had no ascendancy and no enduring cry and just left it as it was. The gear kind of goes into big resists as well as like some life regen, some chaos res and stuff. We've got a pyre over here with extra Ellie res and cannot be poisoned. Yeah, belt with life recovery, fucking extra fire res, just fire res everywhere you could try and get it. And even that wasn't enough. So we had to end up going to the passive tree and getting a lot of fire res there. So we got all the max res, we got Avatar of Fire, got this thing just for faster Warcry speed. And then 2 cluster jewels. The cluster jewels give us a bunch of damage, so like 30% damage nodes, something like that. Both of those do about the same, nothing too expensive. But then we started going towards fire res clusters. So we're talking fire res, and then try and roll fire res or any res, turn it into fire with increased effect as well. Not the easiest thing to roll, couldn't really be fucked doing too much of it, so this one was kind of left pretty undercooked. 20 fire res per point, and then this one is 20 extra 10 and then 4 Ellie, and it doesn't have extra effect as well, so this one's about 30 fire res per point, and all of that does come together to give you quite a bit more fire res. So you can roll them much better and have even bigger fire res, but this is as good as I could be fucked doing at the time, and this is the end result. Because yeah, Winter Orb just wasn't feeling that great that I felt like I really needed to like min-max the shit out of this thing, so I just kind of left it at a decent enough little attempt at a build. We've got like life per hit with vitality. That's mostly where I'm getting some big recovery from when there's a lot more enemies on screen. Ball lightning, life tap, cast and damage taken. Righteous Fire's over here. We've got enduring cry. We've got faster attack with shield charge. Lightning Golem that gives us good mana regen, so I can actually stand still and cast very heavily. Frostblink, Arcane Surge, Vitality, Zealotry. Purity of Fire needs to be at least level 23 for the plus 5 res. I think in the end I kind of went over the top on res. I had this like spec'd and then unspec'd it, but yeah, it's pretty decent to get lots of fire res all over the place these days, so it's definitely possible. Then got Sniper's Mark with extra damage taken from Proj and stuff. Pretty good stuff there too. And yeah, that's more or less the build. My Mercenaries, nothing too crazy, just has Perkles giving us haste. She does Ash on hit, Scorch, which barely does anything, Combs Binding, which is pretty nice, and then a Flammability and an Ellie Weakness on hit, which earlier on in the build did help, but by the point you've almost got 200 fire pen, doesn't do too much. And then has to do an Anathema so that I can do my Sniper's Mark and she can do those on top. And this is where I get some Frenzy charges as well. That's basically it. That's the build. It was kind of interesting, kind of whack. I don't really think I recommend copying it. Like, if you want to, you can. It won't be a terrible build, but I think you can do much better for Chieftains, and I think you can do better for Winter Orb as well. So more of a proof of concept, I think. Once again, it does end up being like that plenty of times. Maybe you can take some ideas for Chieftains, or for the Ring, or for Winter Orb, but overall, bit of a meh result in my mind. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the next project, which will hopefully be another wacky adventure. So with that, thank you very much for watching. See you guys next time.